welcome to another edition of HBCU Sports Live. I'm Kendrick Marshall with a special guest this afternoon. I have HBCU Legends Cal Mosley. Cal has
What's
been
going on,
covering.
Kendrick? How
I'm
you doing, bro?
good. Yourself? I'm good. Good. Nice to finally have you around.
Yeah. Happy
Yeah,
Sunday.
yeah. Happy Sunday to you too. Yeah. So like the both of us have been covering extensively the Texas Southern football coach search. It's taken all kinds of twists and turns, and
Yeah.
they eventually came away with the name for a new coach. It's Cris Dishman, ex NFL player, extensive background in coaching from the college level to the pros, all the way to XFL. He was hired on Friday after what was the 8 week or so search by the school to find a head coach. So Kyle, from your perspective, I think the one question folks would want to know is why did TSU settle on Cris Dishman?
Good question. Haven't been able to get that answer yet. And to be honest with you, yesterday I was going to try to get to the basketball game, and I understand Cris Dishman did make an appearance. I think Dr. Granger was there as well because, his son plays for the Texas Southern men's basketball team. I just think right now, Kendrick, as well as what you guys were reporting, everything pointed to Fred McNair as the possible hire. I think in the 11th hour, someone on either the board of Regents as well as someone on the search committee decided to kind of make a pivot, and they pivoted toward Cris Dishman, who is a well-known name in the Houston area. People still love Cris Dishman for his years of service with the Houston Oilers. He still had a lot of faithful fans that would really know who he is, but some of the younger fans still don't know who he is, right? Because we're talking about 20 years from really being in the Houston area. But other than that, man, Cris Dishman is a good guy. I had a great conversation with him directly after the hire. He's excited about taking the responsibility of being able to guide the team, lead young men, and he feels as though he's going to be able to make a positive difference for Texas Southern as a whole.
Okay. Yeah, just from the outside looking in, it kind of seemed like the Board of Regents wanted someone who had Houston ties,
Yeah.
wanted someone who had NFL experience or had an NFL background. Is that the kind of way you kind of looked at it?
Everything keeps coming back to that centralized point. After the first recommendation for Coach McNair was presented to the Board of Regents, they wanted to, well, I know 3 individuals on the board wanted to see if they could include Andre Johnson to the whole process, right? Andre Johnson, who is up for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, played for the Houston Texans for quite a long time before he ended his career. And they kept going back to, let's go have somebody with a little bit more well-known name or something to that nature. Now, a lot of people know Coach McNair here in the Houston area. Coach McNair does a very good job recruiting players from the Houston area as well as Texas. And, he has a great name as far as being the brother of Steve McNair. He's went to Celebration Bowl. He has the longevity in the SWAC. A couple of people kept on pointing back to the fact that Coach McNair did not beat Texas Southern, right? And I heard this as a point of contention is, why would you want a coach who couldn't beat Coach McKinney and Texas Southern to be able to take over his role? I don't think that was a fair analysis, in my opinion, but it's not up to me. I think Coach McNair would have been an outstanding coach. I think Cris Dishman brings a fresh approach. He brings some guys that will be on his staff that he's already talking to. I know he said he's trying to get these guys lined up as far as they may have some pro experience, college experience, maybe some D1 FBS experience as well. So he's looking at trying to assemble a staff that's going to be able to bring some winning back to Texas Southern. Now, he said it's not going to be overnight. He understands that, and he wants the fans to understand that. Don't expect to do or kind of replicate what Coach Prime was able to do over at Jackson State. But I think all in all, Cris Dishman, he's kind of focused on this, and he's ready to go, man. He's excited.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna get back to McNair because his situation is it's awfully, if you're in his camp, kind of heartbreaking. He's out of a job right now because he did not stay at Alcorn State with the perception that he was going to be the next coach at Texas Southern. So eventually, from your perspective and what you know from your reporting, how close was the deal actually to be done at Texas Southern? And eventually, like, why did it fall apart?
Again, don't know why it fell apart other than the Board of Regents did not come to a quorum. That means they did not have the votes to be able to approve the contract that was being recommended to them by interim President Sias. Okay. So they went back to the drawing board. They asked to be able to put Andre Johnson into the mix. They also interviewed a couple other candidates. I know Brett Maxey, who was also in Brett Maxey's corner. A lot of his faithful believed that he was the number 2 choice, just in case Coach McNair did not get the job, because Cris Dishman's name was out there and we knew there were interviews, but we didn't know it was ranking high on the list for the search committee. So, but other than that, I would say this, Kendrick, the search committee had their list. And when you look at the wish list that Dr. Granger gave to me, and I published out there that he wanted somebody from the SWAC or somebody with HBCU experience, previous head coaching experience, someone who is familiar with, who has a winning record and a winning program. And, you know, he's seasoned and he can be able to develop young men and be able to recruit well. That's Coach McNair. We don't know if that's what we're going to get from Coach Cris Dishman, but everybody has to start somewhere, right? And I think this is his opportunity to be able to go out and prove that he's going to be a solid head coach for the Texas Southern Tigers. And it's interesting, Cris Dishman, Eddie Robinson Jr., as well as Bubba McDowell, all of those guys were teammates together from the Houston Oilers, as well as my cousin Steve Jackson. They were part of the what they call the young guns in the secondary, right? But of course, Robinson was the linebacker. He came a couple of years later. But when you talk about Bubba McDowell going against Cris Dishman, you talk about 2 buddies who are going to now be going head to head in that Labor Day Classic. And it's just like all faithful rivals across all HBCU land, if Southern doesn't beat Grambling, we got a problem. If Grambling doesn't beat Southern, there's a problem. If PV doesn't beat Texas Southern and vice versa, it's a problem, man. And I think one of the undoings for Coach McKinney, who is a really good guy, was the fact that they were leading in that Labor Day Classic and they lost the game in overtime to Prairie View. They also were leading that final game against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and Arkansas Pine Bluff just had a tremendous second half, and he lost that game as well. And I think that those 2 games were pretty much pivotal for him, and that's why the athletic department decided to take a different route and start the search for a new head coach.
Right. And listening to an interview Dishman did with a local Houston TV station and reading your piece, one thing that kind of stuck out was the fact that maybe he's not too familiar with the Black college landscape and the SWAC landscape. How much of a concern was that for the search committee? But before moving on to him, or why did they kind of like overlook that and make the move to go with him?
Search committee, I think we're okay. We're talking about two different bodies. Search committee with Dr. Granger and his team members presented guys like Fred McNair, who had that quality to be able to understand the HBCU landscape as well as the Black college landscape, right? So, which is the same, Kyle. I don't know why I repeated that. But so that's that committee. Then you have the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents is a very diverse committee who are made up of appointees from Greg Abbott, who is the governor of the state of Texas. So culturally, there's a more diverse board than you would have based upon the makeup of the search committee for what you had with the athletic department. So to answer your question, I think the two kind of were not on the same page when it came to trying to find somebody who understood the Black college, college scene. And I think the board, that's why they kept on going back to the NFL and making sure we have somebody who has a name or more prominent name out there in the market. And look, Kendrick, let's be honest about this. Right now in Black college sports, money is starting to be a factor, and you talk about these young men who are going from school to school, or if they commit to a school, NILs are part of the deals as well. And we have to be able to be mindful of this. Cris Dishman feels as though he could be able to get the alumni on board, get the boosters on board, try to find sponsors or market the program to people here in the fourth largest city in the United States to be able to get some of this money, NIL deals, to help them be able to recruit the top level talent.
Yeah, we kind of heard the same thing when Andre Johnson's name kind of popped up, that he would be able to do some of those things despite the fact he had no coaching experience at all. And this thing, I'm curious about one other thing. As you know, like Kevin Granger made a recommendation for Fred McNair, and obviously he's not the coach. They went in a different direction. Does it say anything about the confidence the Board of Regents has in Granger, and also how much is his power respected? Because his recommendation wasn't, approved in that way. I spoke to one athletic director in the SWAC who told me that, like, I'd never been part of a process where my recommendation or anybody else's recommendation wasn't approved by the Board of Regents. So does that say something about, like, the power that Kevin Granger has at Texas Southern?
I don't know. They just voted before this process took place for the head coach search. They just gave him an extension to his contract. So if they didn't believe in his ability, I think it was a month or two before he got into the search, I think Dr. Granger would have been asked to step down. But I don't think it's a problem with Dr. Granger and the board. I think right now you just had some different viewpoints, and everybody wanted to be able to have their say, because as the Board of Regents, they felt as the fiduciary, before we go ahead and approve this contract, we have to be able to make sure we unturned every stone and made sure that we interview all the talent that's available at our disposal. And that's where they decided on Cris Dishman.
Yes, some of our guys were thinking because the process, took so long, despite the fact they had moved on from Clarence McKinney back when the regular season officially ended, that it somehow was going to hurt Texas Southern during the 2024 season, since, like, Cris Dishman's got to play kind of like catch up behind the 8 ball in recruiting. How do you forecast him being able to kind of rally the troops and put together a really good staff and recruit and be able to prepare for the 2024 season?
Yeah, he did point to that part that he had already been talking to some guys about assembling a staff. So he also still has some coaches that are still with the program under contract. You think about, let's see, the defensive backs coach and cornerbacks coach, Darren Garrigan. He is an outstanding coach. You know, he's the one who really helped elevate Hamilton, who went on to transfer to the University of Houston. They had another young man who performed very well for Texas Southern this year as well. He's very well liked and thought of. There are a number of people on that staff who still are under contract, are very good for this program. So there may be some holdovers, right? Now, as far as behind the eight ball, yes, some aspects they are behind the eight ball, right? Because you would probably have some guys who would say, I want to stay here in Texas, or I want to stay with Texas Southern, or they decided to enter the transfer portal, i.e., look at what's happened with Andrew Body, right? He's now going to Alabama State. But as far as the other guys, they had a few significant, commitments that were given to them just recently. I know some more guys may be signing on board with them, but I think it was Coach Nichols who kind of was the interim guy and still helped out with the recruiting efforts for the Tigers before all of this went down.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Andrew Body. He kind of dropped the news he was going to Alabama State the same day Texas Southern made the announcement they were hiring Dishman. I find it kind of ironic. I know they got Jace Wilson, who's a quarterback now there. Why did Andrew Body leave? Was it because of McKinney not being retained, or do you have other motivations, you think?
I don't want to speak directly for Andrew, but I can tell you that, one, I'm sad because Andrew, a lot of people don't know, he's a great young man, class act, always was available if we asked him to interview. His family is great people, his mom and dad, you know, he has so much extended family that people in this community have become ingrained with him. So kudos to Andrew for his decision. I think Andrew probably wanted a change of scenery. I think Andrew also, not knowing who the new coach was going to be, wanted to try to take his future into his own hands. And I just applaud him for the decision, because Eddie Robinson Jr., if you look at what's happening with the Hornets, man, Bama State, they could be the next power in the East, competing against Jackson State. We don't know what's going to really be happening over at FAMU now since Willie Simmons is gone, right? So Andrew Body, we're talking about a second-team preseason offensive player of the year projected for 2023, right? And he just couldn't make it a go. He wasn't just fully healed from that surgery. I mean, the injury that he had against Alabama A&M. I think Body's now, since he is healthy, he is ready to be able to make a difference. You got to like the fact that Bama State has a dual threat at quarterback, and he's one of the most seasoned quarterbacks in the whole SWAC. Think about it. I mean, he's played probably more games in SWAC than most of these other quarterbacks. So you have to be able to say, does that tilt the power to Bama State? Possibly. To have somebody like Andrew Body. And I think Bama State also has a new offensive coordinator, right? So if you look at all of that in totality, you have to think Bama State going against probably Texas Southern or Prairie View again, or you look at what Mickey Joseph may be able to do at Grambling, or Terrence Graves over at Southern. It's just going to be great to see this parity in the SWAC and some of the games that are going to come up this upcoming season.
Yeah, there is a sentiment out there, and maybe Andrew Body signing with Alabama State has kind of shifted the power, not only in the SWAC, but in the SWAC East. I mean, like you talked about it with like FAMU and certain their head coach's position. They don't have that Jeremy Musa anymore. Jackson State, you know, they don't know who their quarterback's going to be going into next season. And Alabama State actually has been improving under Eddie Robinson Jr. I think they won the most games last season with 7 than they had in like 9 or 10 years. So they're definitely on the up and up. But before I let you go, Kyle, thanks for all your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, look, I got to give this shout out to Eddie Robinson Jr. That's my NOLA homeboy there. They are what, 13-9 with him? I believe that's the record over the past 2 years. Think about it. He came out of the business sector, took over this program, and has led them pretty well the past 2 seasons. They've had some disappointing losses, right, Kendrick? But that's pretty good for what he's done thus far. Could that be the same type of model people have been looking at for Cris Dishman, right? You know, to be able to come out of the pro sector, not really knowing, like you said, not understand the HBCU landscape, but could this be a model for success for him as well?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that as my final question. Like, we've seen it with Eddie Robinson Jr., as you mentioned. Bubba McDowell at Prairie View didn't have any head coaching experience at the college level before taking over for Eric Dooley. And Eddie George at Tennessee State, obviously in a similar predicament.
Right.
So do you think like maybe like schools now will not try to go after the big celebrity names like Deion Sanders or somebody like that, but like guys who know like were NFL players but had some coaching background and to infuse into their programs at the same time?
Good question. Don't have enough of those positions going around every year, right? I would say this, man, and this is not a knock on some of the great coaches that are out there. There are a lot of great assistant coaches who also deserve a chance. And I think that has been echoed from coach to coach and some people behind the scenes. Why aren't we giving more of these coaches an opportunity who have been in the HBCU as an assistant coach or a coordinator, giving them a chance to be able to elevate to the next level as well? Everybody wants the big name. Everybody wants to splash. And we're in a society now that people want to win now. They're not looking for people going to develop or grow or anything to that nature. So they want to have the wow factor, right? So I don't know if this is going to continue a trend. If it's successful, it may continue a trend. You know, the NFL is good for this as well. They're a copycat league. The NBA is a copycat league. So you have guys that are giving some success out there. Can they maintain the success is going to be the issue.
Okay. Well, good stuff from Kyle T. Mosley. Once again, he writes for HBCU Legends, does a really good job over there. You catch all his coverage on Texas Southern and all the black college sports on his website there. Kyle, thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and Kendrick, man, keep up the great work yourself, you, Ken, and all those guys over at HBCU Sports. You guys are leaders in the industry, and I look up to what you guys are doing and look forward to being able to work with you guys and collab later. Okay?
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.